right, I'm going to discuss how to get a checkbox layout, sort of, I would call it a checkbox menu, like I have here under Years to See. And so a couple things we're going to talk about here. The first main reason I want to do a video is oftentimes when I make this, I run into a situation where the checkbox, when resizing, the text will go to the next line. The checkbox will stay on that original line. So I want to talk about how we can format that to have the checkbox and the text paired together. Also going to talk about how to set this hard right edge so that your menu is not just constantly going all the way across, right? We want it to just take up one little section of the web page. And so how do we define that parameter? And then also, how do we set it to where it does go horizontal, because it defaults to a vertical layout. So just to briefly talk about the CSS that's going on here and the HTML, you can think of this as like a layered situation where we have the container, and that's the bottom layer, and that container layer is in red, and it goes all the way from left to right. And then that second layer is going to be two blocks, one to the left, one to the right. If we expand it out here, that you can see the left block is green, and so this red goes all the way across and underneath this green, but then I've colored the second layer so that green's showing. The one on the right I haven't colored, so it's invisible. And then on top of that we have our menu, and I'm going to be talking about this one over here. So come over here to the code. You can see the div class of container box, that's the red, and under the styles I've just given it display of flex. And so what that does is it makes it the items inside of it go left to right rather than straight down. And so that's important. And then we've got the next one of that left box that's green, and then the right box down here. And so this is where I'm going to start the example, and I'm going to give it I'm going to say a div right here underneath this right box. I'm going to give it a class of right box as well, because I want it to be to the right of that right box. So if I were to put, I know this is sort of basics, but sort of cruise through this real quick. So if I was to put this here, you see that's another box over there. Okay, so the style on the right box is a padding of 5px, and then that width of 20%. And so this is the first part to answer the question of how do we set that hard right border on the right box, defining a width of whatever. It will make it to where that it's a defined width, so it prevents it from constantly going all the way to the right until it hits the far right edge of the window. We define that right box with a 20%, and we could change it to whatever we want, but that's going to set it to where once the menu goes over and hits this edge right here, it's going to go down to the second line. So how do we get a checkbox? We get a checkbox by doing, I'm going to open this back up because this is the final code if you don't want to listen to the whole thing. How to get the checkbox is we do input and then type of checkbox, and then the next one is the ID. This is a unique ID to each checkbox, and this is useful when you're doing JavaScript and you want to be able to dynamically change something about the checkbox or the text. So I'm just going to give this a name, CK1 for the time being. The next part controls whether we want it checked by default or not. If we want it checked by default when the page loads, we'll say checked and then / and close that off. So I'm going to copy this, Control C, paste a couple more, and I want to change that ID because that's unique. I'll hit Control S to save, and then I'll come over here and hit F5 to reload. You can see that's put 3 checkboxes up there. Now, if we wanted to put text next to these checkboxes, there's 2 different ways to do it, and it depends on what you want the text to be able to do. If you want to just have the text there and nothing is ever going to change about that text, we'll just come right over here and we'll say choice 1, choice 2, choice 3. All right, we'll refresh that. And you can see that that's put that text there. But we'll never be able to change the text in that, that checkbox dynamically. And what I mean by that is you come over here and see this, I have a drop down here. If I change this drop down, you see that changes the text on those boxes. The other issue we have currently is that if we resize this, and I'm not doing it correctly, let's see. There we go. Look at choice 2 over here. You see how 2 went down to the second line, but choice is still up here and the checkbox is still up there. And if we did a little further, now choice 2 is on the second line, but that checkbox is up there. It makes it very confusing when you're trying to figure out, someone might look at this and say, oh, choice 2 is on the right there. So what we want to do is we want to have a rule where whenever the text moves down, that checkbox follows it. So over here in the code, how we do that is instead of where these inputs are, instead of just having all these inputs, we're going to wrap each input with another div. And we're going to assign it inline block. And so inline block as a class, we have to come over here to the style sheet, and you see I've already defined this class. I put a period there that defines a class, and then inline dash block, and then within that is a display of inline block. And this makes it easier for us to do an inline block layout. And if we read about the difference between inline and inline block, has a little text here, and it talks about the benefits of inline block over inline. Also talks about the difference between block. Block is the default, I believe, and so this is why when you first do it, you'll see it going from top to bottom. It says the block elements don't sit next to each other in the elements, but inline block does. And then it says inline block also has some other benefits as well. So that's what I'm using here. So I'll come over here and do inline dash block. I'll copy this, Control C, or Control X to cut actually, and then I'll paste it in here. And what I'll do now is I'll just copy this entire thing and then change these around here. Remember to change the ID, because each ID has to be unique. Then I'll get rid of these down here. Control S to save. F5. And now you can see that what we have here is choice 1, choice 2 on the first line, choice 3 is on the second line, and we shrink it. Once it needs to move choice 2 down, it moves the entire text, choice 2, along with the checkbox, so they're paired together. And because this text is so big, it's moving it to look vertical. I'm going to shrink down here. Okay, you can see though it's not going vertical. It's got these 2 on the first line here, and it's just moving everything down when there's no more space to be had. Final thing to note, if you want to make these text dynamic through JavaScript, what we'll have to do is instead of defining the text there, we'll erase that and then put a div right below this input. Inside of this div class of inline block, and we will also give this a class of inline block. Give it an ID. This can be whatever. I'll say just A for the time being. Paste that underneath both of these, and remember to just change the ID. So to show what a basic JavaScript looks like to control the visibility of the text of that div, you see here that based on that compare value represents that checkbox over here, where to compare. That's what this is right here, compare value. So I said whenever it shows filing status, we want the display to be none on the text, but whenever it's something other than filing status, we want it to show inline block and then show the value of 2022. And all of these do the same thing. And so whenever we come up here and have filing status, it hides the text. When we have text here, it shows it. So you see I have 7 inputs here, but over here I only have 5. You can see though that it still has 7 checkboxes here. So we've got 5 texts. The text for 6 and 7 is being hidden correctly, but the main issue we have here is that the checkboxes are still showing. And so how we'll do that is we'll come back to the index and we'll find that ID of the checkbox. And so for my code here, that checkbox number 6 is going to be TY 2022 and TY 2023. So I'm going to copy this right here and I'll put it right below it. I'll change this ID here to TY, what was it, 2022? Yeah. Then I'll do this right down here where it says inline block. I'll copy this. And again, change this to the ID of that checkbox. And I'll do the same thing for number 7 down there. So I'll save that, Control S, and then hit refresh over here. And now you can see that when we have tax years here, we have 7 checkboxes with the labels. And then for filing status, it hides those 2 checkboxes and it hides the 2 texts. So now we're only able to see 5 checkboxes.